Some betrayals don't scream. They burn, slowly, until the silence becomes smoke and the truth ignites everything you thought was real. Pregnant wife locked in a burning car by Mistress, but her escape will shock everyone. Lena screamed inside the locked car, her breath catching as flames danced around her, licking the leather seats and fogging the windows. The smell of gasoline choked her lungs, and her swollen belly pressed painfully against the steering wheel. Outside, standing on the gravel shoulder of a desert highway in Arizona, Camille watched with a twisted smile. She struck another match, slowly, letting it flare in her fingers before tossing it into the leaking trail of fuel. The fire whooshed higher, roaring like a beast. Lena slammed her fists against the windows, eyes wild, voice begging, crying. But Camille just stood there, red lips curled, eyes empty, heart cold. The luxury SUV, once a gift from Damon, now became a cage of fire, rolling slightly forward toward the canyon's edge as if ready to fall. Flames wrapped around Lena's world. No one was supposed to hear. No one was supposed to come. But fate wasn't done with her. Yet Lena used to be the woman every other woman in the Silicon Valley elite envied. She wore diamonds the size of raindrops, carried designer bags straight from Paris, and her modern hilltop estate had glass walls that made guests gasp. Damon, her husband, was a self-made tech mogul, always smiling in photos, always holding her hand in public. To outsiders, their life looked like a dream. But inside the concrete and steel walls, Lena's heart froze day by day. The man she loved no longer looked her in the eyes. The warm arms that once pulled her in close now only pushed her away. And every time she reached for his hand, he had excuses. Investor calls, board meetings, code releases. The fairy tale was rigged from the start, built on image and money, not love. And as her belly grew with their unborn child, so did the silence in their home. Her voice echoed in empty halls. Her laughter died unheard. Love had turned into a show, and Lena had become nothing but a silent prop. It all changed when Camille walked into their lives. Tall, with red lips that looked like poison and eyes that never blinked. She started as Damon's strategic consultant, always around, always smiling, always knowing too much. Soon, she became the shadow that followed Lena, whispering behind her back, glancing at Damon like she owned him. At dinners, Camille's hand would brush his arm too long. Her voice became the one he listened to. And slowly, room by room, Lena's place in her own house began to shrink. The staff looked to Camille for instructions. Her favorite chair was moved. Her tea was no longer made the way she liked. Every corner whispered that she no longer belonged. Damon never spoke it out loud, but the message was clear. Camille was rising, and Lena was fading. Her home became a palace of ice, and her heart broke quietly each night as she lay beside a husband who no longer saw her. The day of the baby shower was supposed to be a moment of joy. Guests had left. Balloons floated lazily in the air. Lena, tired but smiling, was told by Camille that she'd drive her to a surprise, somewhere peaceful. She had said, trusting her. For once, Lena climbed into the car, but when they reached the canyon's edge, everything turned dark. Camille stopped the vehicle, stepped out, and locked the doors from the outside. Lena panicked. She pulled at the handles. Nothing worked. Then the smell of gasoline hit her. She looked down and saw the liquid seeping beneath the car. Her breath caught. Camille walked slowly, holding the red gas can like it was a gift, pouring it gracefully around the tires before stepping back with a box of matches. Lena banged on the window, screamed, begged, but Camille just watched. Her lips smiled, but her eyes were dead. "Goodbye, Lena," she whispered through the glass, then walked away as the flames started. The fire rose and the wind carried her laughter. Just when the heat was unbearable and Lena's lungs were giving out, a sound shattered the nightmare. A passing jogger saw the smoke, ran toward the fire, and without hesitation picked up a rock and smashed the window. Glass flew. Air rushed in. Lena coughed, trying to shield her belly as strong arms pulled her out. The man rolled her onto the grass, patted out the small flames on her dress, and called for help. She passed out as sirens wailed in the distance. Hours later, Lena opened her eyes in a cold hospital room. IV in her arm, pain in her body, fear in her chest. Her hand reached for her belly, still there, still safe. She cried silently, relief mixing with horror. But the horror didn't fade when she closed her eyes. That night, every time she drifted towards sleep, the scent of burning leather returned. Her chest would tighten, and her hands would tremble, gripping the hospital sheets like they were the car door she couldn't open. The nurses called it trauma-induced panic attacks. She couldn't speak without gasping, couldn't be alone without feeling the phantom heat creeping up her legs. But when she looked up at the small TV mounted in the corner, her breath froze again. Damon and Camille were at a gala, smiling hand in hand, laughing in front of flashing cameras. No one knew. No one cared. And Lena, burnt and broken, realized she was now completely alone. Lena returned home against medical advice. Her heart pounded as she stood at the doorstep of their glass-paneled estate overlooking the hills of Santa Barbara. The grand entrance, once hers, now felt foreign. The door clicked open, and the familiar scent of lavender, her scent, hit her. But it wasn't just lavender. There was something else, something unfamiliar, something invasive. As she stepped inside, her eyes scanned the hallway, the delicate chandeliers, the floating staircase, the framed memories of a life that once felt like her own. But everything had changed. When she made her way upstairs to her bedroom, she froze at the door. The once intimate space was no longer hers. The door was slightly ajar, and as she pushed it open, the scent slapped her. Camille's signature perfume, a heady mix of jasmine and rose, lingered thick in the air. It was everywhere, like a creeping reminder of the woman who had taken her place. The bed was now dressed in lavish silk sheets. The walls no longer held Lena's personal touches. It was a scene designed for someone else, someone who belonged here. Lena's things, her clothes, her belongings, her life, were shoved into the guest wing like discarded items. The vanity she once stood at every morning was now cluttered with Camille's expensive beauty products and perfume bottles. She had never touched them. The room felt cold and distant, a place that no longer welcomed her. It wasn't just the change in decor. It was the way the house itself had turned on her. Lena had built this home, created a life here with Damon, and now she was nothing more than a ghost. Her steps echoed hollowly in the vast, empty space. She was a stranger in her own mansion. As she walked back down the hallway, she noticed how the staff no longer acknowledged her presence. A servant glanced her way before quickly looking away, pretending not to see the woman who once commanded the respect of everyone in this house. The silence hung thick in the air, broken only by the sound of Lena's heels clicking against the polished stone floors. She wasn't just a stranger in her own home, she was invisible. The life she had built, the family she had created, they were now part of the past. Lena was nothing now, nothing but a faint echo in a house that no longer cared she existed. Her hand trembled as she reached for the letter. It was tucked deep in the corner of Damon's late father's study, hidden from view as though someone had tried to make it disappear. Lena's heart raced as she carefully unfolded the yellowed paper. Her eyes scanned the words written in black ink, and the world around her seemed to blur as the contents of the letter burned into her mind. It was a legal document, a sealed envelope meant for no one else to find. Her unborn child was named as the only rightful heir to the Kessler fortune, the inheritance, the power, the empire. All of it was now tied to the child she carried inside her. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she processed the weight of the letter's contents. She had always thought the attempts on her life were born of jealousy, of a twisted affair. But now everything had changed. It wasn't just about love or betrayal. It was about money, power, and legacy. The Kessler fortune was at stake, and Lena's child had become the target of something far more sinister. She wasn't just a victim of infidelity or manipulation. She was a pawn in a ruthless game, one that could cost her everything. The deadly plot to kill her hadn't been born out of passion, but from the cold, calculating desire for control over what was hers by right. Lena's hands shook as she folded the letter back up, her mind reeling. The real enemy wasn't just Camille. It was the greed that had consumed Damon, turning him into someone she no longer recognized. Later that night, as Lena lay in her bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her eyes fluttered open, her pulse quickened. As she heard the voices downstairs, Lena crept quietly toward the staircase and peered over the banister. Damon and Camille were speaking in hushed tones, their words dripping with malice. Lena held her breath, trying to make sense of the conversation. "She's still breathing," Damon muttered. Why isn't she gone yet? Camille's voice was harsh, angry. Damon's response was cold, almost detached. Then make sure next time she doesn't survive. Lena's stomach churned as she clutched the railing, her heart shattering with each word. It was clear now, her life didn't matter to Damon anymore. He didn't care about her, not the woman he had promised to love, not the mother of his child. She was expendable, nothing more than a roadblock to his power, his future with Camille. The two of them had planned her death, plotted it like a business deal. The man she had loved was now a stranger, someone she couldn't even recognize. The recorder Lena had secretly turned on in her hand trembled as she listened to the chilling exchange. Every word, every promise of her death was now captured. She could hear Camille's voice dripping with venom, and Damon's indifference, as though her life meant nothing. Lena's chest tightened as the gravity of the situation settled in. She had been betrayed by the one person she trusted most, and her child was caught in the crossfire of a war for power. But she wasn't going to let them get away with it. Lena clutched the recorder tightly, her mind racing. This was no longer about love or revenge. This was about survival. She would not let them win. She had to fight back, even if it meant risking everything. The life she had built, the family she had loved, it was now shattered beyond repair. The man who had promised her forever had betrayed her in the worst way possible. But Lena wasn't just going to roll over and die. She was going to make sure they paid for what they had done. The darkness in her heart matched the storm brewing inside her. Lena wasn't going to be the victim. She was going to be the one in control. The next day, as Lena walked down the grand hallway, every step felt heavier. The estate, once a symbol of her life with Damon, now felt like a prison. The cold marble floors, the walls that once held laughter and warmth, now echoed with the silence of betrayal. The faces of the staff, who once greeted her with smiles, now avoided her gaze. It was like she was invisible, a shadow walking through the halls of a life that no longer belonged to her. Damon had erased her, made her nothing more than a ghost in her own home. But Lena wasn't going to let him get away with it. The rage she felt boiled inside her, a silent fury that burned hotter than anything she had ever felt before. Every word they had said, every plan they had made to end her had only fueled the fire inside her. She was done being the victim. It was time to take back control. Lena stopped at the foot of the stairs, her eyes narrowed with determination. Damon might have thought she was weak, might have believed she was nothing without him, but he was wrong. She had something he didn't. Strength. And with that strength, Lena would make sure they both paid. She had a plan, and it was a plan that would bring them to their knees. But first, she needed to expose the truth. She needed them to realize she was no longer the woman they could push around. Lena was done being invisible. As she turned to walk toward her next move, the recorder was tucked safely in her bag. Lena knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. What she had learned last night was only the beginning, and the battle for her life was just starting. But in this battle, she would be the one who came out on top. Her heart pounded with anticipation, her eyes focused on the future. They had underestimated her, and that would be their mistake. Lena would make them regret ever crossing her. Lena's hands shook as she dialed Marin's number. Marin was her closest friend, the one person she could trust in a world full of lies and betrayal. Marin wasn't just a journalist, she was a fighter, and Lena needed her, now more than ever. She hadn't spoken to her in months, but today was different. Lena needed help to fight the war against Camille and Damon. The moment Marin picked up, Lena's voice was steady, yet desperate. "I need you, Marin. We're going after them. Everything they've built." Marin's voice crackled with concern, but Lena could hear the determination in her tone. "What's going on?" Lena explained the situation, how Damon had left her for Camille, how she was living in a mansion that no longer felt like hers. But Lena wasn't going to let it go. She was ready for revenge. Together they would dig into Damon's empire, find the dirty money, the lies, the trail of destruction he and Camille had left behind. Marin promised she would start digging immediately. As Lena ended the call, a strange sense of calm washed over her. The war had begun, and she had just found her first soldier. The charity gala was supposed to be a celebration, but for Lena it felt like a twisted mockery. Camille, wearing a dress that screamed opulence, stood by Damon's side, flashing her diamond ring to the world. "Damon and I are engaged," she announced, her smile wide and cruel. The room erupted in applause, but Lena remained in the shadows, watching the scene unfold. Her heart burned with rage, but she didn't show it. She smiled, an expression cold and knowing. Camille and Damon were celebrating their happiness, but Lena knew something they didn't. Their downfall had already begun. Every lie they told, every promise they made, was nothing but the beginning of their destruction. Lena had nothing to prove to them. She would let them have their moment of triumph, but it would be short-lived. She had a plan, and soon the world would know who the real victim was. Lena sat in the quiet, dimly lit room, staring at the phone in her hands. Reed, Damon's estranged younger brother, had called her, and Lena had agreed to meet him. The tension was thick, but Reed was surprisingly calm. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "The board is questioning Damon's judgment. He's losing his grip." Lena's eyes narrowed. She had always known Reed wasn't like his brother. He wasn't blinded by power or greed. He had always been the quiet one, the observer. And now he was offering his support. "If you expose him, you'll have the board on your side. The company could be yours." Lena felt a rush of power course through her veins. For the first time, she had an opening. Damon had underestimated her, thinking she was weak. But he was wrong. With Reed's help, she had a chance to take everything he had built. She smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. This war was far from over. Marin's voice was urgent when she called Lena. "I've got something for you," she said. Lena felt a shiver of anticipation. She met Marin at a secluded cafe, her heart pounding. Marin handed her a flash drive, her fingers trembling slightly. Lena's eyes widened as she saw the footage on the screen. It was Damon, in a private meeting with his lawyers, discussing the legal documents that would erase Lena from everything. "We need to act." "Quickly," Marin said, her voice grim. Lena stared at the footage, her blood running cold. Damon hadn't just wanted her gone. He had planned her death, both legally and physically. Months before the fire, he had already set in motion the plan to remove her from his life completely. The fire wasn't just an accident. It was a carefully orchestrated move to destroy her. Lena clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not now. Not ever. Lena stood in the master bedroom, the same room that had once been her sanctuary, now tainted by Camille's presence. She could still smell her perfume lingering in the air, a constant reminder of her betrayal. Lena's hands trembled as she held the footage in her hands, the evidence of Damon's plan to destroy her. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on her. She had been silenced, controlled, and manipulated for far too long. But not anymore. Lena's voice was steady, but there was a coldness in it that sent a chill down her own spine. "You tried to kill me. Now it's your turn to die, publicly." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She wasn't just going to take back her life. She was going to destroy Damon and Camille. They had taken everything from her, and now she would take everything from them. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. This war wasn't over. It had just begun. Lena held her phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of the room. Her finger hovered over the send button, but she hesitated for a moment. She thought about everything she had endured, Damon's lies, the betrayal, the fire that nearly killed her. She'd been silenced for so long, but not anymore. Her thumb pressed down, and the footage of the blazing car went live. It was out there now, sent to every media outlet, every board member's inbox. There was no turning back. But as she stared at her phone, waiting for the flood of reactions, another notification popped up. It was a message. The words felt like a punch to the gut. "Camille is pregnant, and she claims it's Damon's." Lena froze, her heart dropping. The whole world now knew about the fire, about her near-death experience. But this was something else. Could it really be true? Could Damon have gone that far? The footage was now spreading like wildfire. But everything had changed. Lena's revenge, her path to justice, had just become a tangled mess of lies and betrayal. She stood there numb, staring at her phone. It wasn't just about the fire anymore. This was bigger, and the truth might not be enough. The engagement gala was supposed to be a celebration. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, the air heavy with champagne and laughter. Camille stood beside Damon, her new diamond ring gleaming as she proudly announced their engagement. But as the toasts began, everything changed. The screens on the walls flickered to black, then burst to life with flames. The screams, the unmistakable shadows of Damon and Camille. Silence fell over the room. Lena, wearing a sleek black gown that accentuated her baby bump, walked in slowly. Her eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before her. The guests looked around in confusion as the footage spread across every screen. Security rushed in, trying to regain control, but it was too late. Phones lit up as people captured the scene. Headlines would explode by morning. Damon's face strained of color, his mouth opening, but no words came out. Camille gripped her stomach, her face twisting in fear. But Lena didn't speak. She didn't need to. The footage, the truth, was louder than anything she could say. The betrayal was laid bare for the world to see. Everything they had tried to hide was now in the open, and there was no running from it. Lena's heart pounded, but there was no fear, only the satisfaction of knowing that her enemies had finally been exposed. They were finished. Backstage, amid the chaos, a quiet voice broke through Lena's thoughts. One of Damon's uncles slipped into the room, a folder in his hand. "There's a way out," he said, his voice slow, almost pleading. Lena looked at the folder, then back at him. Inside, she saw papers, contracts, offshore accounts, financial control of everything she could ever dream of. All of it was hers, if only she would agree to bury the footage, to stop the story from going any further. Her heart ached, remembering the life she once dreamed of, a life filled with luxury, power, and the love she thought she had. It could all be hers if she just stayed silent. But then, a small kick from her baby reminded her of what had happened. The fire, the lies, the cold betrayal. Her hands shook as she ripped the folder in half, the paper shredding between her fingers. The silence in the room was deafening. "No," she whispered. She couldn't take their blood money. She couldn't protect them. She had to let her voice be heard. The silence that had kept her captive for so long was over. She wasn't just going to stay silent. She was going to destroy them. The truth would burn them to the ground, and nothing could stop her. Now, in the velvet hallway, Camille was cornered. The flashing lights of cameras surrounded her as the pressure of the situation collapsed on her. Her makeup was smeared, mascara streaking down her face. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "It's Damon's child." She shouted her words, a desperate plea. "You were always in the way. I'm the one he chose." Lena stood there watching, her posture straight and regal. She felt power flowing back into her as Camille collapsed in front of her. But then Camille reached into her purse, pulling out a small velvet box. The room went silent. Camille opened it, revealing not jewelry but an ultrasound photo. "He gave this to me," Camille hissed, holding it up for Lena to see. "Because you never mattered." The words stung. The image, the lie, it all hit Lena like a wave. She had known the truth all along. But now, Camille was trying to rewrite it right in front of her. Lena's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just about a man or a woman. It was about war. Camille had crossed a line, and Lena wasn't going to let her get away with it. The betrayal was deeper than she had realized. But now the battle had shifted. Lena wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everything she had lost, for the baby she carried, and for the justice that had been denied to her for so long. As the media stormed the room, Damon tried to speak, his voice shaking as he reached for Lena. "I didn't know," she lied. "Lena, please, listen to me," he begged. But every word was too late. The footage had already been seen, the bribes, the lies, the fire, Camille's pregnancy claim. The weight of it all crashed down on him. And Lena watched in silence. She had no sympathy for him, no compassion. He had betrayed her in ways that words could never describe, and now it was time for him to pay. 2 officers walked toward them, their steps firm. One pair of cuffs went onto Camille's wrists, the other onto Damon. The crowd parted as they were led away, their heads down in shame, their world crumbling before their eyes. Lena didn't feel victory. She felt relief. For the first time in months, the weight was lifting. Her world had been shattered, but in that moment, she finally felt free. The cameras still clicked, and the world watched as her enemies were dragged away. Lena exhaled deeply, knowing that justice had been served. But in her heart, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The story was far from over. Days later, in the courtroom, Lena's heart pounded as she walked toward the witness stand. Her steps felt heavier with each movement. The room was filled with the cold silence of anticipation. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her, those who believed her, those who had been part of her nightmare, and those who had no idea what she'd been through. She had come so far, but this moment, this very moment, was the hardest. At first, her voice trembled, the weight of everything overwhelming her. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the stand. I never imagined this would be my life," she started, her voice breaking. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint sound of her breath, the quiet sound of her rage building. But soon the trembling faded, replaced by something fierce, a fire, a determination. She was no longer the broken woman who had been pushed to the brink, no longer the victim. The truth was coming out, and she was going to make sure everyone heard it. "Everything they told you was a lie," Lena said, her voice growing stronger. "Camille and Damon, they never cared about me. They only cared about their power, their money." She turned, meeting the eyes of her betrayers. "They tried to kill me, but they underestimated me. I survived, and now I'm going to make them pay." Every word she spoke cut through the room like a knife. She could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief, but Lena didn't care anymore. The lies were unraveling one by one, and the truth was coming out, painfully, slowly, but undeniably. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Lena," he said softly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Lena's heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. The verdict was moments away. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath, waiting. And in that moment, Lena knew this was her victory. She had fought, and now the world would finally know. The courtroom buzzed with a new tension as the verdicts were read aloud. Lena's breath caught in her chest when she heard the words, "Guilty." Damon, the man who had betrayed her, the man who had once promised to love her, was finally being held accountable for his crimes. His face drained of color as he was sentenced for conspiracy. His world crumbling, the power he once held slipping through his fingers like sand. Beside him, Camille, his accomplice, the woman who had helped push Lena to the brink, stood frozen in shock. The woman who had been pretending to be Lena's friend had secretly manipulated everything from the shadows. Now her secrets were exposed. The truth came crashing down around her as the prosecutor laid out her fraudulent schemes, her lies, and her deceit. The news was even worse for Camille. Her child, the one she had always used as a pawn in her twisted games, was taken from her. Her mask of a perfect mother was ripped away in front of the world. There was no place left for her in high society. She had once ruled it. Now there was no luxury left to hide behind. Her life, once full of wealth and manipulation, had been reduced to nothing. Public shame, humiliation, and the loss of everything she had ever held dear. But the headlines didn't stop there. They only kept growing. Camille's downfall was only the beginning, and Marin, Lena's ally, wasn't done yet. She had her own plans to expose even more of the corrupt world that had hurt Lena so deeply. Marin's exposé hit the world like an earthquake. It spread across the media, tearing through the elite circles that had once looked down on Lena. The truth was a weapon, and Marin wielded it with deadly precision. Every scandal, every power game, every hidden abuse, nothing was left untouched. Lena's near-death experience was detailed with a chilling clarity that made it impossible for anyone to ignore. The world was forced to confront what had really been happening behind closed doors, the dark world of manipulation, betrayal, and violence that had consumed Lena's life. The rich and powerful, once untouchable, were now exposed, their lives crumbling under the weight of their own actions. Lena watched in silence as the names of the guilty were dragged into the light. She had once been powerless, once been the victim, but now the very people who thought they could control her, destroy her, were paying the price for their greed and lies. Her story became a symbol of survival, of defiance, and of the truth that could never be hidden for long. Lena had won. She had taken back her life and made sure the world knew what had really happened. Months had passed since the trial. Since the lies had been exposed, Lena had slowly begun to rebuild her life, piece by piece. The scars of her past were still fresh, but they no longer controlled her. And now, as she held her newborn daughter Amara in her arms, she realized just how far she had come. Amara wasn't just a baby. She wasn't just the child Lena had fought to protect. She was a symbol of survival, of strength, of the future Lena would now build. Amara was proof that, even after the worst storms, life could begin again. And this time, it would be Lena's choice. As she gazed down at her daughter, Lena felt a surge of hope. She had been through hell and back, but now she had something pure, something beautiful to live for. No more manipulation, no more power games. It was just her and Amara now. And Lena was determined to give her daughter a life full of love, safety, and truth. Lena stood on the edge of the cliff, staring out at the vast Pacific. It was the same place where she had almost died. The place where she had bled and faded, the place where she thought her story would end. But now, as she stood there with Amara in her arms, everything had changed. She wasn't the woman who had been broken and pushed to the brink by betrayal and pain. She was stronger now, scarred but unbreakable. The past had tried to destroy her, but she had fought back. She had survived, and she had rebuilt. With one final glance at the place that had once threatened to take her life, Lena turned her back on it. She would never forget what had happened. But she would no longer let it control her. Her new life was in front of her, full of promise, full of hope. But as she walked away from the cliff, she knew. The storm inside her hadn't passed. It was only just beginning. There were still so many people who needed to face the consequences of their actions. And Lena wasn't going to stop until every last one of them had paid. Dear friend, sometimes life strips us down to the bone. Not to break us, but to remind us who we are beneath the masks, the roles, and the noise. Lena's journey isn't just one of revenge or justice. It's about reclaiming power after being left voiceless. As the Stoics taught, we cannot control what others do to us, but we can choose what we do next. Lena chose to rise. Not for approval, not for applause, but because survival is an act of quiet defiance. And healing, true healing, is not forgetting the fire, but learning how to carry its lessons forward with grace. Even after everything tried to silence her, she became her own echo. And now she's the voice her daughter will never have to search for. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more powerful stories like Lena's to light. Your support truly means the world.